Who am I? This question has puzzled philosophers, sages, and yogis for centuries. Different traditions and schools of thought have tried to answer this in their own ways. And even today, modern psychology continues to explore what the self really is. Some say the self is the ego, a psychological boundary that separates me from everything else. Others see it as a collection of experiences, a vast memory structure shaping our identity. Over time, psychology has evolved, often treating the ego and self as the same, linking it to emotions like self-esteem, motivations like self-enhancement, and how we relate to others. But when we look at Indian traditions, the perspective on self and ego takes a deeper turn. Yogis and meditators have spent lifetimes investigating human nature, leading to timeless insights that don't always fit into modern psychological categories. One of these is ahamkara. It is a Sanskrit term combining aham means self and kara means doer, often translated as ego. In yoga and Vedanta traditions, ahamkara isn't the true self, but a surface identity built on bodily and mental experiences. It's what personalizes everything, turning events, thoughts, and emotions into my experiences. This is where self-relevant beliefs, attachments, and emotions take over, sometimes distorting reality, creating arrogance, or fueling self-importance. Now, to understand ahamkara fully, we break it down into four key aspects. First, individuality or Vaishishtya. Second, separation or Dvaita Bhav. Third, agency or Kartavya. Fourth, identification or Abhimana. Individuality. It's our uniqueness, what makes us distinct. Separation is the sense of being different from others. Agency is the belief that we are the doer of our actions. Identification is our attachments to things, roles, and relationships. Each of these shape our identities. A person may feel like an executive at work, a parent at home, or a friend in social settings. These identities don't exist in isolation. They interact and reinforce each other, strengthening the overall sense of ego. Now, in modern psychology, a strong ego is often linked to high self-esteem. But there is a catch: boosting self-esteem too much can lead to narcissism or noisy ego. That's why newer approaches emphasize a compassionate and regulated ego, one that is less self-centered, more interdependent, and helps in personal growth, not just for oneself, but for others as well. This sets the stage for a deeper exploration of self and ego. But the real question is, if ahamkara is not the true self, then what is? And how do we go beyond it? That's what we will uncover next. Adi Shankaracharya says, what is called Jiva is not absolutely different from Brahman. What we call the Jiva, the individual self, is not fundamentally different from Brahman. The distinction arises only because Brahman, when conditioned by limiting adjuncts like the intellect or buddhi and the other mental faculties, assumes the role of a doer and experiencer. In reality, there is no actual separation between the individual and the Supreme Self. The difference exists only due to avidya or ignorance, which creates names, forms, and the false identification with the body. In some dualistic traditions, the term Atman is used to refer exclusively to the individual self rather than Brahman. When the Atman identifies itself with the body and mind, it is known as Jiva. However, upon attaining mukti or liberation, this false identification dissolves. Yet in these schools, even after liberation, the Atman is considered distinct from Brahman, though it becomes almost identical in nature. This is described as an organic relationship, where the Atman is a part of the greater whole Brahman. The type of difference described here is known as Svagata Bheda, a distinction within a single entity. At the same time, the Upanishads and Brahma Sutras affirm that Brahman is the cause of the universe. According to all schools of Vedanta, Brahman serves as both the material cause or Upadan Karana and the efficient cause Nimitta Karana of the world. The material universe, with its countless living and non-living beings, is in a constant state of change. It exists in dualities, heat and cold, pleasure and pain, and in every way it stands in contrast to Brahman, which is unchanging, infinite, and beyond all opposites. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Brahman is the only thing which has never become uchishta, that is, defiled by human mouth. Brahman is the sole reality. The Upanishad declare, all this is Brahman, there is no multiplicity here. Shankaracharya resolves the apparent contradiction between non-dual Brahman and the finite changing world by introducing a two-level reality. The first is Paramarthik Shatta, the absolute reality, which is what Brahman truly is. The second is Vyavaharik Satta, the empirical or relative reality, which is the world as we experience it. This distinction is crucial to understanding Advaita Vedanta. At the empirical level, whatever is directly perceived through the senses or pratyaksh is accepted as real, at least as long as the experience lasts. While sensory perception can be limited or misleading, science and reason help refine our understanding, proving the practical reality of the world. The fact that billions of people have experienced the world for thousands of years further reinforces this standpoint. However, the Upanishads declare Brahman as the only absolute reality, and philosophers like Nagarjuna have argued that the world is ultimately unreal. This leads to the paradox that the world appears both real and unreal, which seems contradictory. Advaita Vedanta resolves this by stating that the world is neither purely real or sat, nor purely unreal or asat, but something beyond both sat, asat, vilakshana. Since this does not fit within logical categories, It is described as anirvachaniya, indescribable, or mithya. In Advaita, mithya does not mean mere illusion or falsehood. Rather, it signifies something that appears real but lacks absolute reality. This relative existence of the world is due to Maya, ignorance or illusion, which makes Brahman appear as the world. At the Paramarthic level or absolute reality level, Brahman remains non-dual, infinite and self-luminous consciousness. The world is considered unreal only from this high standpoint, while sensory experiences, pratyaksh, are indirect because they rely on external instruments. The experience of Brahman is direct or aparoksha, a self-revealing awareness beyond the senses. Brahman does not need an external source to reveal itself. It is swaprakasha, self-luminous consciousness, shining as the Atman in the hearts of all beings. Everything is known through consciousness, but consciousness itself cannot be objectified. It is the very source of all knowledge. Shankaracharya's two-level reality is a unique feature of Advaita Vedanta. Sri Ramakrishna expressed the same idea in simpler terms as Nitya, absolute, and Leela, divine play. A similar concept is found in Nagarjuna's two levels of truth, Shamvritti Shatya, conventional truth, and Paramartha Shatya, absolute truth. However, there are key differences between their approaches. Nagarjuna's theory applies to truth in general, while Sankara's covers all of reality. Nagarjuna's method is purely logical and negation-based, while Shankara integrates logic with scriptural authority. Nagarjuna denies even the empirical reality of the world, while Shankara accepts it at the relative level but denies its ultimate existence. Shankara introduces the idea of adhyasa or superimposition, where the world appears falsely imposed on Brahman, an idea absent in Nagarjuna's or Vigyanvad Buddhism. Thus, Shankara's Advaita builds upon and surpasses Nagarjuna's dialectics, creating a comprehensive Vedantic framework that explains both the reality of Brahman and the illusion of the world. Advaitins establish the unreality of the phenomenal world through two primary lines of reasoning. First, impermanence implies unreality. Anitya is ashatya. Secondly, consciousness, chit, and the unconscious, jara. What is impermanence implies unreality. The ultimate reality, Brahman, is eternal and unchanging. Therefore, whatever undergoes change is impermanent and must be unreal. Anitya is ashatya. This principle was first articulated by Nagarjuna in the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, where he questions the existence of things that neither existed before nor will exist in the future. Gaurapada later echoed this in his Mandukya Karika. Contradiction itself is a sign of falsity. Since all dharmas or phenomena are contradictory, they cannot be true. From this, Advaitins derive the principle that non-contradiction, avadi tattva, is the test of truth. The impermanence of the external world is evident in different states of consciousness. In dream, swapna, and deep sleep, susupti, the waking world ceases to exist. These states contradict the waking experience. proving that the external world lacks absolute reality. However, Brahman, as the inner self, Pratyag Atman, remains unchanged as the eternal witness, Shakshi. This is known because after deep sleep, one recollects, I slept well and knew nothing. This shows that awareness persists even when the external world disappears, proving that only Atman, Brahman, is real. Advaitins recognize the third kind of reality, Pratibhashika Satya, or illusory existence, which applies to dreams. A dream appears real while it lasts, but is negated upon waking. Similarly, the world appears real until one awakens to the realization of Brahman. The second argument focuses on the antinomy between the subject, consciousness, and the object, the world. A core Advaitic principle states that consciousness is always the subject and can never be objectified, while objects require consciousness to be known. Consciousness itself is self-revealing, Swam Jyoti, and does not depend on anything else for its awareness. Since all objects belong to the realm of the unconscious, Jara, the subject-object relationship itself is false. As Chitshuk explains, the world is ultimately false only when the Absolute is realized. Until then, it appears real due to ignorance or avidya. Thus, Advait establishes that the world, being impermanent and unconscious, cannot be absolutely real. Only Brahman, the eternal and self-luminous consciousness, is the sole reality. So now we need to understand the avidya or agyan. It is as the conjoined cause of the world. Maya, also known as agyan or ignorance or avidya. It is commonly understood as absence, distortion, or wrong knowledge across various philosophical traditions. However, Advaita Vedanta presents a unique perspective on Ajnana, differing from others in three key ways. First, Ajnana is universal and ontological. Second, Ajnana is superimposition or adhyasha. Third, Ajnana is not mere negation but a positive entity or bhava-rupa. Ajnana is universal because it is not merely a psychological phenomena occurring in an individual's mind, but a universal reality pervading existence. Ajnana is superimposition since reality is of the nature of knowledge. Ajnana functions as a veiling power, covering the true nature of Brahman and giving rise to erroneous perceptions. Ajnana is a positive entity or Vahab-rupa because the manifold world is not a mere illusion. It remains empirically real as long as one is within the domain of ignorance. Maya is an active force that manifests as the empirical universe, making it a positive entity rather than mere absence of knowledge. Maya also acts as a cooperative cause. Brahman is described as both the material cause, Upadhan Karana, and the efficient cause, Nimitta Karana, of the universe. However, this doesn't imply that Brahman undergoes transformation, but rather it is the unchanging, non-dual substratum behind creation. The varied names and forms in the world arise due to Maya, which acts as a Shahakari Karan or cooperative cause, akin to the two intertwined strands of a rope. Maya operates through two fundamental powers, Avaran Shakti or veiling power, secondly Vikshiv Shakti or projecting power. Avaran Shakti conceals Brahman's true nature, preventing its direct realization. Vikship Shakti creates the diverse objects of the universe, sustaining the illusion of duality. The unique paradox of Ajnana. Despite its profound explanatory powers, the concept of Ajnana presents logical contradictions. If Brahman is self-luminous and pure knowledge, how can ignorance exist in it? Can darkness coexist with light? Secondly, if Brahman is infinite, Ajnana must also be infinite, which implies that the realization of Brahman by one individual should remove Ajnana universally, an implausible notion. Attempts to resolve these contradictions exist, but none fully satisfy logical scrutiny. Let's understand what are the two forms of Ajnana. Ajnana is classified into two types: Karan Ajnana and Karya Ajnana. Karan Ajnana is also known as Mula Vidya or root ignorance, the cause of creation itself, responsible for the diverse universe, including the ego. This is known as Ishvara Srishti or God's creation. Karya Ajnana, also known as Tula Avidya or manifest ignorance, the cause of individual experiences such as attachment, fear, and desires. This is known as Jiva Srishti, individual's creation. Thus, Maya or Ajnana, though illusory in essence, is functionally real, akin to Prakriti in Sankhya or Shakti in Shaktism. However, it is ultimately sublatable through true knowledge, revealing the non-dual reality of Brahman. This remarkable synthesis of ontology and epistemology crafted by Shankaracharya remains one of the most profound contributions in the history of philosophy. We will conclude this video by sharing a brief discrimination between the seer and the seen. It may help us to relate all the concepts we have been listening so far. Vedanta extensively discusses the fundamental distinction between the seer, Drig, and the seen, Drishya, the subject, Vishayi, and the object, Vishaya, the ego, Aham, and the non-ego, Idam. The seer is the perceiver, identical with the subject and the ego, and is of the nature of pure consciousness and intelligence. In contrast, the seen is the perceived, identical with the object and the non-ego, and is insentient by nature. The seer is pure sentiency, whereas the seen is inert matter. They are mutually opposed and must never be identified. Yet, due to ignorance, Ajnana, people habitually superimpose the attributes of the subject onto the object and vice versa. This illusory identification manifests in everyday statements like "this is I" or "this is mine," where the I, which is pure consciousness, is confused with material objects such as the body, mind, senses, possessions, or nationality, and so on. Similarly, one falsely attributes the changing conditions of the body, birth, growth, illness, and death to the eternal self, saying, "I am born, I am growing, I am ill, or I am dying." True knowledge arises from discriminating between the seer and the seen. So the seer is unchanging, homogeneous consciousness, the ultimate subject and the real ego. Whereas the seen is everything perceived, external, transient, and multiple. It belongs to the realm of matter, non-self, and illusion. Recognizing this fundamental difference is the path to liberation and the realization of absolute truth.